I wondered what I would talk about, and I thought that I should talk about something Ludwig was interested in. And so I went back to what we discussed 25 years ago. And because, so, oh, the pigeon, no, no, okay, okay. And at that time, we were discussing about how to put Virasoro on the lattice, or Liouville theory on the lattice. And in fact, the question which was asked by Ludwig was in fact the relation between conformal field theory and its deformation into integrable structure. And I think this is still a very active field of research. So, so let's go back 25 years ago. No, it's not this one. Page. So that was 25 years ago, and names have changed, like Paris University also.
Much less sky now.
Huh?
Now we have much less sky.
Much less sky. But that was a very sunny day, yes, yes. So, in these days, Ludwig, Leon, and Sasha Volkov, they had their own version of how to put Liouville on the lattice. And I had my own version also. So I recall what my version. And so we have potential U of x satisfying a Poisson bracket, which is Virasoro Poisson bracket. And we want to put it on the lattice. We want to discretize it by preserving integrability. So this is not so easy because there is a delta triple prime. So instead, I used the results of Gervais and Neveu, who associated to the potential U of x the solution of this second order differential equation, xi. And there are two solutions. And they showed that one can choose a basis such that the Poisson bracket of the two solutions can be written in a very simple formula like this, so-called the exchange algebra, where the R matrices R plus and R minus are the classical R matrices of SL2R. Okay? And now, of course, if you know the solution of the equation, you can reconstruct the potential by some Wronskian tap expressions. Yeah? So instead of putting directly the potential on the lattice, we put the xi on the lattice. And this is much simpler. So you can write the exchange algebra on the lattice. And there you don't have much choice. I mean, that's about the only thing you can write. And then the analog of the second order equation is just an equation like this. And therefore, you have three quantities, or two quantities, W1 and W2, which are Wronskian tap expressions. And this is the analog of the second order differential equation used by Gervais and Neveu. And now, of course, we know that it's a null vector equation, but at that time, I mean, it was before BPZ. Huh? And okay, so knowing the Poisson bracket of the xi, we can compute the Poisson brackets of the W's. And here it is, and it is a quadratic algebra. Now, one can make this algebra is quadratic, but it's not simple, because if we define this object, which was in fact introduced by Ludwig and Leon, then the algebra splits. And here, the most interesting part is the so-called Faddeev-Taktayan Poisson bracket, and it gives rise to the Volterra model. And there is another part, the W1, which is in fact a U1 current on the lattice. So this model has been extensively studied in particular by Volkov, but I will say nothing about it. And so my idea recently was that, you see here we have a Virasoro structure, and here we have a U1 structure. Now, in recent years, one of the important discoveries in conformal field theory was this AGT business. And there, it's very important to have a U1 current in addition to the Virasoro structure. So I thought maybe keeping the U1 current will simplify things. And it's quite obvious already at the level of the W algebra, because it's quadratic, while the Fadeev-Takhtayan bracket is cubic. So I wondered, what do we get if we keep all degrees of freedom? So we have two chiral fields instead of one. So we keep two chiralitives. Well, that's very easy. No, oh yes. Yes, all this can be made quantum, of course. You can write the quantum algebra, quantum exchange algebra. And so the R matrices are the usual SL2 quantum R matrices. And the value of the Q parameters were computed by Gervais and Neveu. And they are given here. And we found one of these modular pair of modular double theory of Ludwig. And also we can give a bosonic field representation of the exchange algebra with canonical operators phi n and pi n. So this is the analog of the Coulomb field on the lattice. So we have an explicit representation, and we will use it later. So what do we get if we keep all the degrees of freedom? So we go back to our recursion relation, and we divide it by W1, Wn1 n minus 1. And then we can rewrite this in this way. We haven't done much. But then it becomes a symmetrical operator. So the definition of Q, big Q, and big P are here. The S of Fadeev and Takhtayan is easily expressed in terms of big Q and big P. And when you have done that, you can rewrite this recursion relation in a matrix form, which I will show. But the Poisson bracket of the P's and Q's is still quadratic. So in contrast to the Poisson bracket of the SNs, which were cubic, now we stay with the quadratic algebra. And here is a quantum version of that algebra. So using these big P's and Q's, we can rewrite our recursion relation in this way with a big matrix. And of course, this is a typical Jacobi matrix of the Toda theory. So you can take the trace of its power, compute its Poisson bracket, and you find that they commute with the bracket of the P's and Q's I've shown before. So this means that we have a Toda theory which is integrable, but not with a standard Poisson bracket. So of course this is known, and if you look at the literature, you find that it is exactly the second Poisson structure of Toda, which was written back in '79 by Marc Adler. It's exactly the same.
But now this guy is quantum one, yeah?
We can make it quantum. At that time it was classical, of course. Now, Fadeev-Takhtayan Poisson bracket is in fact still in the Toda family, but it is associated to the fourth Poisson structure. And it's a reduction of, we have to kill half the degrees of freedom. Okay, so instead of using this big Lax matrix, it's much better to use the small 2x2 Lax matrix, which I've written here. And we can compute Yang-Baxter algebra, if you wish, the commutators of the L's. And since the commutation relation between the P's and Q's couple sites n and n plus or minus 1, this is not an ultralocal theory. So we have to use relations of Friedel-Maillet type. So they are written here. So we have matrices A and D, which are analogs of R matrices, and then we have C and D, which describes the commutation between adjacent sites. And we have computed with these R matrices with Genia when he visited Paris at Christmas. But I will ultralocalize the theory in a second, so I will not show them to you. But I draw your attention to the fact that when you compute the monodromy matrix, you have to insert a small matrix gamma between the L's. And the gamma has to satisfy this relation. Now, when we have computed gamma, and we found a family. So there it depends on an arbitrary parameter, D22. So this parameter will reappear later. So one can develop the theory in this way, but since we have an explicit representation in terms of P's and Phi's, the Coulomb field, let's look what we get when we represent the operator P's and Q's in terms of pi and phi. So these are the explicit representations. And of course, we have this Weil type relation in the quantum theory. So the L operator is written here, and it's not ultralocal, it couples different sites. So we make a gauge transformation, and then it becomes ultralocal. But it's not the end of the story, because we have to build this T here, and we have the gamma. So we still have to keep it. And so what is more natural is to use the Ln, which is this ultralocal L times this factor here. And then it is written here. And it depends on two parameters now, or one parameter. If you said D equal D22, this gamma parameter has the ratio D tilde over D. It depends on D and D tilde, and we can separate them by a simple rescaling. So we really have two parameters. And note that the determinant of L is not central in this case. So this L satisfies the usual now Yang-Baxter equation with an R matrix, which is a 6-vertex R matrix, the twisted one, because there is this Q square here. And we can look at the first Hamiltonians we get. And so we have a family, because we have a parameter, this gamma parameter, D22. And in one case, if D equals 0, we get the Q to that case. So this was extensively studied, in particular by Misha. And the modular double ideas of Ludwig were implemented in full details here. So it's a very, very nice, very important paper. And I was always wondering what was the relation between this Q to that chain and our conformal business. But now we understand it's very, very much related. And these operators here are just the Coulomb fields, in fact. But we can take another choice, say D tilde equals 0, and then we get a much simpler Hamiltonian. And this, I call it Harper, but maybe it has another name. It's not really Harper model, because this has to be realized with Hermitian operator, not unitary operators. Okay. Yes, perhaps a remark. You see, in this L matrix here, so here we have a linear combination here. So we may compute, we may try to find a pseudo vacuum to start a to start beta ansatz. But if you, a naive pseudo-vacuum, if you realize this with a Hermitian operator, this pseudo-vacuum is not in any reasonable Hilbert space. Well, if you realize in terms of unitary operator, and if Q is the root of unity, then you can find a pseudo-vacuum and start building a beta ansatz. So I don't know what's the relation in terms of conformal field theory of this case. Maybe it's minimal models, I don't know. So the next step would be to solve the model, right? It's good to write them, but then at some point one has to solve them. So having no beta ansatz, we have to separate the variables. So we have to do what Sklianin told us to do. So we define the separate variables as the zeros of C in this case. And then the conjugate variables are the AN evaluated at the zeros. And they satisfy Weil-Tapp commutation relations. And yes, and how many do we have? C has degree n-1, so we have n-1 lambda k. So we have 2n-2 coordinates, lambda k mu k, for a phase space of dimension 2n. But the extra degrees of freedom is related to the symmetry phi and phi plus translation by C. So one has to take the quotient by this symmetry, which means that we have to fix the momentum, which is precisely the zero mode of conformal field theory. And this is the determinant of the monotonic matrix. So everywhere now we fix the determinant to P0 and consider only functions of the difference. So once we have separated variables, we have to solve the spectral problem. It's reduced to one-dimensional problem. So we have to write Baxter equation. They will look like something like this. And then because of the modular double property, we have to add the second Baxter equation. They are compatible. We have to solve them together, which means that we have to repeat this series of work, Gutzwiller, Godin-Pasquier, and the recent paper by George here. And from the talk this morning, we know that it's not something simple. So, but I think we have to do it if we want to compute matrix element. At some point, we have to compute correlation functions. Otherwise, I mean, we can talk forever. So let's assume this is done. Then we want to compute matrix elements of operators in this theory, which means that we have to express the operators in terms of the separated variables, because the spectral problem will be solved in these coordinates. So this means that we have to solve really the quantum inverse problem. That's exactly the definition of the quantum inverse problem. And it turns out that this problem has a very simple solution. So in particular, last summer, Sklianin wrote a very beautiful little paper. And it makes things now very simple and beautiful. So to solve the inverse problem, we have to compute the eigenvectors of the Lax matrix. The spectral curve gives you something about the eigenvalues, and we have to build the eigenvectors. So we have to solve this kind of equations here. And since we are interested in the periodic chain, so we have to impose some Floquet condition. So we have to normalize the eigenvector, say at site 0. Otherwise, we don't know what we are talking about. And then this Floquet solution tells you that psi 0 is the eigenvector of Tn, the monotony matrix. And then, so psi 0 is given here. That's a very simple equation. And mu, of course, satisfies the spectral curve equation. And then psi n is simply given by Tn, so the partial monodromy matrix from 1 to sat n acting on psi 0. So it's just this formula here. And this shows you, by the way, that the poles of these vectors are above the zeros of Cn, so above the lambda k. Yeah? And above lambda k, on this curve you have 2 points, because it's a hyperelliptic curve. Yeah? And the 2 points are precisely an of lambda k and dn of lambda k. And so you see that above the zeros of Cn, we have a pole only at one of the points. When mu equals dn, the numerator vanishes, so the pole is killed. And okay, so yes, maybe. So this is, of course, compatible with the general properties, analytic properties of eigenvectors, which are described by a general theorem by Igor. But here we have explicit realization in terms of the matrix elements of the monodromy matrix, and that's important. So this formula introduces special polynomials, you see. So we have an and dn, which are elements of the partial monodromy matrix from 1 to small n. But then we have these strange polynomials here. And these polynomials have a very simple interpretation also in terms of monodromy matrix. They are simply matrix elements of the monodromy matrix on the complementary interval from n plus 1 to small n plus 1 to capital N. So this polynomial here, you have given here. So just expressed in terms of the complementary monodromy matrix. So these are the formulae here. And this allows to compute the degree in particular. And this has to be compatible with the general analytic properties of Kretschmer. And it's not easy to see it here because there are big constellations between the two terms. So psi n is given by this, and so now you see that we have polynomials, for instance, Cn and Cn n plus 1, and you can count the number of coefficients. And knowing the degrees, you see that we always have n minus 1 non-trivial coefficient in the sum of the two coefficients, these two polynomials here. And now we can express the fact that above on one point above lambda k, there is no pole. The residue has to vanish. And these are relations like this on these polynomials. And we have n minus 1 lambda k. So this is a linear system of n minus 1 equation for n minus 1 unknown, the coefficients of the polynomials. So Riemann-Roch tells us that it exists and it's unique, and here we compute it. And so the solution of the inverse problem is just to solve this linear system. Now, of course, in the classical case, we can rely on Kretschmer, Riemann-Roch to write the equation from scratch. But in the quantum case, we don't have quantum Riemann surface, quantum meromorphic functions, or whatever. So we have to prove the relation directly. So can one prove directly this equation in the quantum case? And that's what Genia did. And it's so simple that I can even show you the proof. So we have this equation. And so Genia introduces a polynomial which is given by this. So you see when lambda equal lambda k, so here I get this, and then an of lambda k is mu k, and then here I have this guy here, but I've made a small modification here because in the technology of Denia, we have to substitute lambda from the right or from the left here. And then I have to push a lambda k through this guy, and so I have to compensate with this. So if you take this polynomial and substitute lambda equal lambda k from the left, you get this equation. And so to prove this equation, you just have to show that this polynomial is divisible by Cn of lambda from the left. So let's do it. So we replace the determinant by the quantum determinant. And then this an here, I split it into, with the mononomial matrix on the two subintervals, from 1 to small n and small n plus 1 to big N. So I get this equation. And you see already that these two terms cancel, because Cn commute because of ultralocality. So these two terms cancel, so I'm left with this equation. And now, so it's quite simple. And so now A here is not on the right, but I can use a second relation coming from the quantum determinant to commute these two guys here with this relation. And then now I can factorize it on the right. And what I recognize here is just the polynomial Cn written with the mononomial matrix on the two subintervals. So it's a beautiful proof, and it's very simple, and it solves the quantum inverse problem, in fact. So now we have matrix Mn with this polynomial which I introduced, which are entering the formula for the eigenvectors. Of course, I can compute them using the initial variables of the theory and the solution of our linear system, so I can compute them in terms of the separated variables. And they satisfy some recursion relation, and so the local operators are given by this. So this is the solution of the inverse problem. But notice that this is a very non-trivial formula, because here the matrix elements are polynomials of high degrees, while here Ln is a first degree polynomial. So there are huge cancellations here. So these are big determinantal identities, and of course these identities are true. But perhaps it's not the best thing to do, and I think it's not the best thing to do. So let's do something else. So for that, we look first at let's have a look at explicit solution. So this is our equation, and I write the solution, I write it explicitly here in its full glory, because I want to draw your attention to the very special nature of this matrix here. You see, the line k depends only on the separated variable lambda k and mu k. And this means that any two elements on two different lines commute. And so, when you compute determinants, there is no ordering ambiguity. And so, in fact, this means that you can compute the left inverse, for instance, of this matrix by the usual formula. You have to divide by the determinant, you have to order it on the left, but otherwise, all the usual formula apply. And so that's why we can solve this linear system at the quantum level. But when you solve a linear system, solution here, you have to divide by some denominator, the determinant. This is the determinant of the matrix. And the determinant is written here. So you see that it's something very, it's a complicated object in terms of lambda and mu's. Now, if you want if you think that we want to compute matrix elements between such operators and the eigenvectors of H, or the Q, the solution of Baxter equation, if you have a denominator depending on mu, there is no hope. This is absolutely hopeless. So one has to get rid of these denominators. Unfortunately, we can do it, because if you look at the highest degree in lambda k in this solution, you find that it has a very special form. It's delta n minus 1 over delta n, and this we can identify it with the initial fields. And so by multiplication, we can compute, in fact, delta n. And the initial condition is just the van der Monde determinant. So we can compute delta n explicitly in terms of the original fields. And then if I multiply everything by this operator, then the denominator, the nasty denominator, has disappeared. I get at worst van der Monde determinants. And then one can hope to compute matrix elements. Yeah? So we have a whole class of operator without nasty denominators. And now there is another way to produce operators without nasty denominators. First, of course, the Hamiltonians themselves don't have nasty denominators, because they are given by Sklianin interpolation formula, and these are linear in mu's and mu minus 1. Next, well, the symmetric functions of the lambda k don't have nasty denominators, of course. And these are coefficients of Cn. And then one can, at the classical level, one can take the time evolution equations of lambda k with respect to time tj, and this will never introduce nasty denominators, because the Poisson bracket of lambda mu is lambda mu. So this is a way to produce object without nasty denominators. And so we consider the ring of polynomials in the coefficients of the C of lambda. The coefficient in this polynomial, we take any coefficients functions of the Hamiltonians, and then we apply any number of derivatives on it. And this produces a whole lot of operators without nasty denominators. And you see, in the quantum case, this means that we take functions of the symmetric functions of the lambda k, and we multiply by polynomials in the Hamiltonian on the right and left. And if you think that you want to compute matrix element between eigenvectors of H, this is a very good presentation, because this will give constants on both sides. Right? And now it turns out that this kind of presentation of operators was already considered by Fedia in particular, long time ago. And it appears in the classification of local fields in St. Gordon. So what we have to do is to rewrite the solution of for quantum inverse problem in this form. It's not easy to do it. But I have given, there is no doubt that one can do it. I have worked out some example. One is here. But there are tools to do it at the quantum level, which were developed precisely by Fedia. And these are the so-called, what he calls the deformed exact forms and the deformed Riemann bilinear identities. And these are absolutely essential to also in the fermionic description of local fields in St. Gordon and the X-exit chain. So this makes a connection with the present work of Fedia, Tetsuji, Mikio, and so that's very present that's for the present or future, I don't know. And this is important because this fermionic organization of the local fields is precisely what makes clear the relation between the conformal structure and the integrable structure. So that's exactly our subject. Okay, so as conclusion, so I think that this relation between CFT and the integrable systems is an important subject. It was posed 25 years ago by Ludwig and Leon. So this has produced already a lot of very interesting work. I cannot quote everybody, but many of them are here in this room. So, and so I expect a lot more is coming soon. And then to finish, I just I wish you a happy birthday.
But from this formulas, still there is no conformal field theory formulas directly.
No, we still don't recognize the
way too.
It's a way too. But I think to find the connection, one has to compute correlation functions. Otherwise, I don't know what one can.
Connection comes from the first formula, because there are sort of algebra is CFT.
Yes, yes, of course.
Systems is Magritte.
Of course. But then we want more. Yes, of course. But yes. Yeah. But we want more, of course. Yes.
But well, of course, it was for discrete pure field, and you are not little bit. So this code are different from discrete pure.
It's different. Yes.
So,
but still, it's very much related to the conformal structure, of course.
it didn't return to Liouville.
To Liouville itself, no.
Well, I looked at my notes, and there are a lot about Liouville, but I must restore it back.
Спасибо. Thank you.
Thank you.